Hello, 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 and good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hi, everyone. Welcome on in. My name is Jessica Owens. I am a specialist with the UC Davis Resource Center for Family Focused Practice, and you are joining us for our May Complex Care webinar. We are so happy to have you here with us today. We are really excited about today's topic and today's presentation. So if you are just joining the call, please feel free to share who you are and what county or agency you represent. And as always, if you see a friend or a colleague in the audience, please reach out and say hello. With that, as folks are just getting logged on at the start of their day and connecting to audio, I'm going to kick us off with a Menti poll today. So I'm going to go ahead and share that link for you all in the chat right now. So please feel free to click on that link. In a moment, I'm going to share my screen and you'll be able to see the specific code. And if you're more comfortable sharing your answers in the chat, please feel free to do that as well. So for those of you who are just joining, you can introduce yourselves and we are gonna get started with our Menti. All right, you can use your phone to take a picture of the QR code. That will take you directly to the Menti poll. I'm gonna do the same so I can actually answer questions in real time as well. All right, so if you could master any skill, what would it be? That's a very good one. Parenting. It's one of the toughest jobs out there. Reading minds. Patience. Public speaking. These are all great. Oh, okay. Play the guitar. Play the cello. Oh, time management. That's a good one. Swimming. I love that. Oh, photography. I need someone to teach me how to edit all those photos. That would be great. Self-care. That one's really, really, really important. I'm working on that myself. All right, we'll keep the answers coming. We'll have a few more moments here, adding your responses to the Menti poll, or you're more than welcome to add your responses to the chat. Floral arrangement, that's beautiful. That would be a great skill to learn. Well, thank you all for participating. We definitely appreciate your responses. Few more answers coming in. Okay, I'm going to kick us over to the next question. So who would be on your cheering squad while you are mastering this skill? Now, you don't have to give specific details like Lauren Smith at 505 Placer Road, but maybe you could share what their relationship to you is. Who do you need on your cheering squad so that you can master that skill? Beautiful. So we're seeing family, friends, children, siblings, your spouse, your best friend, work family. I like that. Lots of great responses here. I feel like mentors, seeking and finding those mentors that you can really connect with and learn and grow with. Great responses here. All right. Now that we have most folks logged on and connected to their audio, I would like for our presenters today to have a little bit clearer image of who our audience is made up of. So the next question is going to be, which best describes your organization? And please feel free, you can actually pick multiple. And again, you can also use the chat if that's easier. So for most of the folks' responses, many folks in the room today are representing a county, agency. We have a few people in the room from the state departments, some community-based organizations. And for those of you who might be selecting other, please feel free to go ahead and post in the chat so we can capture how to best describe your organization. And I'll give this question just a few more seconds here. All right, it looks like responses are slowing down again. You're more than welcome to use the chat. And the next question, what best describes your role within your organization? All right, got some social workers in the room, a clinician, some probation folks, leadership, and other. For those other, that other category, please feel free to enter into the chat what would be the best way to describe your role. So for our audience so far this morning, it looks like we mostly have folks who are social workers or social work supervisors. All right. Well, it's just really helpful for us to kind of gauge who's in the audience. We always like to know who is in the room. And for now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and continue on with our reminders for the day. So once again, if you all are just joining our complex care webinar for May, my name is Jessica. I am a public education specialist with the UC Davis Resource Center for Family Focused Practice. And this webinar is brought to you in partnership between the UC Davis team and the California Department of Social Services. So I do have a few housekeeping items for you all before we get started. I do have a few of my I have a lot of my UC Davis colleagues on the call with me today. Two of those colleagues are Geraldine Bordage and James Williams, and Geraldine and James will be helping me monitor the chat. They will also be helping answer any technical questions you may have. So they're here to support. So just wanted to give them a shout out. As you know, this webinar should be recorded. It is being recorded. Okay, I see the notification now. So this webinar is being recorded. We do post the recording and the PowerPoint on our website. It's usually available on our website about a week or so after the presentation. So please feel free to keep an eye out for that. And Geraldine is going to be helping to put some of these links in the chat for me. So the other thing I wanted to mention is we do have opportunities for folks to request complex care case coaching. So if you are interested in making that request, we're going to drop that link for you in the chat. And in addition, if you are interested in requesting a letter of attendance for today's presentation, we also have a link for you where you can make that request. So lots of links. One other learning opportunity I wanted to share with you all is that the Resource Center for Family Focused Practice helps support the Neurosequential Model of Therapeutics Learning Collaborative. That learning collaborative does take place once a month. We're going to be sharing some more information in the chat about how you can join and learn more about the Neurosequential Model of Therapeutics. Okay, we are getting close to the start of our program. And really quick, before we get started, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the fact that May is National Foster Care Awareness Month. This, as many of you already know, is a time to recognize the resilience of children and youth in foster care, as well as the individuals who support them. As a person who has lived experience in foster care myself, I want to take a moment to recognize the important role that people from all parts of child welfare play in supporting children, youth, and their families. I am very passionate about advocating for equity and well-being, especially in the way of authentic youth engagement and the importance of lifelong connections, which is why I'm so very excited about our presentation today. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. Today's presentation is brought to you by the UC Davis Center for Excellence in Family Finding Engagement and Support, as well as the California Department of Social Services. The title of today's webinar is It's Never Too Late for Kin First, Advancing Kin First Culture Across Systems of Care. And our very first presenter for today is Mandy Tiara. Mandy is an analyst with the Family and Permanency and Support Services Branch Kin-Centric Compass Unit. She has worked for CDSS for 1 year, supporting the Center for Excellence in Family Finding Engagement and Support, assisting counties with efforts to keep youth connected to their biological families and extended family members. And with that, Mandy, come on in and share a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I've been with CDSS for over a year now with the Kin-Centric Compass Unit. Prior to that, I have a background in probation. I worked there for over a decade where I worked with juveniles and adults. And this is where I've landed. Additionally, I am a wife and mother of an 18-month-old, and I'm always tired. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So the Center for Excellence, Family Finding Engagement and Support. Next slide, please. This is where the seminar is being put on. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what the Center for Excellence is. Essentially, it is to support county efforts in mitigating barriers to placement and keep youth linked to their family members to the greatest extent possible. So CDSS, in partnership with UC Davis, we launched the Center for Excellence in Family Finding Engagement Support Center. We will drop the website in the chat, as well as we'll go over it probably towards the end of the webinar. So the center really provides statewide culturally appropriate trainings for people. We provide technical assistance to county child welfare and probation departments, as well as behavioral health and other child serving stakeholders. This includes tribal partners and service providers to enhance their practices, policies, and efforts for family finding support and engagement. The center is really at the forefront of promoting kinship care and fostering a kin-first culture throughout California's child welfare jurisdictions, partner agencies, and providers. The center is really a dynamic resource and knowledge hub. It serves as a collaborative space for innovation, idea generation, and the dissemination of best practices rooted in the kin-first culture. It's a great website. I do recommend that everybody check it out. It has a lot of resources and tools that can help everybody here. Next slide, please. So the Excellence in Family Finding Engagement Support Program, also known as EFFES, we were granted $150 million in one-time funding. So this allows for counties and tribes that elect to participate in the program. They were able to actually start accessing these funding starting in fiscal year of 2022/2023. A lot of you here, your counties have opted in. Counties and tribes who choose to participate in the program, the deadline to opt in is June 30th of this year. So you have a little over a month to get those plans in if you'd like to use those fundings. After June 30th, allocations for those counties and tribes that did not opt in by the deadline. Those funds are going to be redistributed to counties and tribes that did opt in. All of the funds must be expended by June 30th, 2027. And to date, we have 37 counties and 35 tribes that have opted in. Next slide, please. So allowable funding use for FEs. So what can you use these funds for? Really, the funding purpose is to support existing family finding and engagement services. Some approved activities include staff training on family finding and engagement, practices and models like the cultural brokers, upfront family finding, and Wendy's Wonderful Kids. You're not limited to those model programs. There's additional ones listed on the website. Additionally, you can use the funding for staffing and tools to locate engaged family members, including the use of technology tools like genograms and social media. Outreach and engagement. You can also use the funds to involve child and family team members, service providers, case managers, and prior connections. Plan development and case management. You can focus on addressing barriers to establish positive relationships with family. Also, that you can use the funds to implement the model programs, strategies that are really going to focus on family finding for children who have been in foster care. A specific focus for Indian children, you can engage tribes to identify extended family members per the tribal law custom. Next slide, please. So this is our child welfare and probation county opt-in list. Right now you have an option to opt in jointly with child welfare and probation together. And right now we have child welfare counties. We have 21 that have opted in individually, and you can see the list here. Additionally, we have 12 joint child welfare and probation counties that have opted in together. And we have 4 individual probation departments that opted in. If there's questions towards the end on if your county has opted in, because I know the print's a little bit small, we'd be happy to answer that. Next slide, please. And this is our list of 35 tribes that have opted in. Again, if there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer those at the end. Next slide, please. And that concludes our overview of the Center for Excellence. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Lizzie.
Awesome. Thanks, Mandy. I always appreciate when there is an opportunity for funding connected to initiatives, right? We know that that's a barrier in of itself sometimes when we're talking about implementation and change. So I'm happy that you all had a chance to hear today that that is a component of our family finding, family engagement, family support work statewide. Hello and good morning. I'm so happy to be here with you all. I see so many familiar names and faces. It's great to see you and wonderful to meet so many new names and faces. My name is Lizzie Dembos, and as Jessica said, I am her colleague at the Resource Center for Family Focused Practice. I have been working here for over 2 years, just a little over 2 years. And one of my primary duties and focus of work has been supporting the Center for Excellence and supporting the deliverables that we have been putting forward for everybody to support this work. And previous to working at UC Davis, I have been working in the mental health field, in the child welfare field. I have over 10 years of experience serving children and families. And one of the most important things about me that I like to share is that I'm a glorified auntie. I love my siblings' babies like they are my own. And that's also directly connected to my passion for this work, because in that title of glorified auntie, I've had some time and experience with some informal kinship caregiving for some of my nieces and nephews, and have some firsthand experience understanding the challenges that come with those relationships when we're called in to support our family in a way when it's needed. So I'm happy to be here today talking about this topic and raising awareness. Many of you have probably already heard about us and our work and have already been hearing over the years of your work about family finding and engagement. This is by no means something new, right? We're here to just raise awareness more so on a statewide level and also talk about what we are trying to champion throughout all of our systems so that we can move in the direction of truly being kinship first. So with that, James, if you can kick us over to the next slide, thank you. I am going to start us off with re-engaging everybody in the room on our Menti activity. So it's the same link that Jessica started us off today. So if you still have that up, by all means, you can go back and revisit that. There's a QR code on your screen if you would like to scan that with your phone and engage that way. Or I'm going to redrop the link in chat for you to join us that way. And I would love for you all to take a moment and spend some time responding to this question. And Jessica, if you don't mind switching over to pull up the Menti, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. James, could you stop sharing? Thank you.
Because I would love to hear from you all something, what's one word or image that comes to mind when you hear the word kin? We've already been talking about family. Jessica's question got our brains already kind of thinking about people that matter to us most. And I want to kind of take that one step further out and just talk specifically about when you hear that word kin, what comes to mind? And I already see so many responses, which is great. We've got connection, family, support, safety, individuals who are close like a family member. Ooh, I love this word acceptance on here. That's a beautiful word. Belonging, chosen, loyalty, hugs. That makes me feel good. Chosen family, awesome. This is amazing. So you all have done a really beautiful job of demonstrating and giving us a visual that the word kinship is pretty all-encompassing, right? There is a legal definition in California law of what kin is and what a relative is. And part of that definition is that by law, a relative or kinship is an adult through adoption, blood, or affinity, right? So somebody that you have a spontaneous or natural liking to, okay? And again, I think your answers were very well comprehensive and robust to name that, yes, in fact, that's what we're talking about. So when we move through today's content, and especially on the other side of today, as you're going out and practicing or strategizing with your colleagues how to bolster your family finding engagement and support efforts, let's be making sure that we're thinking about kinship in this very broad encompassing way and not limiting ourselves to think about immediate family, etc. James, it'd be great if you could go ahead and cue up the PowerPoint again. Wonderful, thank you. So how does that fit into this general definition of what a kin first system is or what it means? That's sort of a broad, vague term, right? So what does it mean? Kin first means truly kinship first. It means family first, right? It is a family-centered, kinship-centered approach. And it is more than a transactional sense, right? There's ways in which we engage our families and the communities that we serve that is very transactional in nature. For example, can you be a bed? Do you have a bed? Can this child live with you, right? We really kind of focus on things of that nature, particularly around placement, right? When that's a need. So this kin first system is really a values-driven approach that centers the whole family and experience well above and beyond just placement. It's also about enduring connection and collective healing. So it's reflecting an earnest and ongoing commitment to making sure that families, despite separation and disruption, have an opportunity to remain connected, that those familial ties remain preserved, right? That they have opportunity to spend time together, to build relationships if that's needed, or rebuild relationships, right? Oftentimes when we come into the lives of our families, there's a lot of fractures in relationships, and part of the work that we need to do is to help them mend and heal through those relationships. And in order to do that, they have to be able to have time together to do that. Kin First culture also anchors children and their families, their communities, their cultures, their tribes, and making sure that our structures, our practices, and our partnerships are designed to maintain that continuity, that familiarity, and that sense of belonging, right? That children remain rooted in the care and love of those that they love and that they feel connected to. Next slide. So anytime we're talking about change or transformation, one thing that's really important is to get very clear on values, right? That's a very foundational component and super important. We need to be clear on the why so that when times get hard or we go astray, we have something to bring us back, to keep us centered, and to keep us moving in the direction that we want to go. So what you're seeing on our screen are some of our core foundational values and beliefs. And we, first and foremost, are set on fire here at the Center for Excellence about improving the lives of California's youth and families. And it is our belief that the most sure way to do that is by making sure that we are kinship first in every way, that we are showing up and serving our families and our communities, right? And we believe that families can and do heal. This is something that, as most of you probably know or have firsthand experience, we lose sight of sometimes in our work, right? We get busy, we can experience burnout, right? And we can really kind of lose touch with this. So it's really important for us to come back to this because it is something that we need to embody in our practices and in our work with our communities we're serving. We also really truly believe that everybody we interact with as a system, a serving system, needs to be treated with respect and humanized and valued, right? It is a system in which we are ensuring our biases and our judgments are kept in check, that they are looked at, that they are reflected upon, so that they do not continue to influence the ways in which we are showing up, the ways that we are interacting, who we're engaging with, who we're not engaging with, etc., right? That we see value in anybody and everybody, regardless of their past, what they've done, where they've been before they're showing up, and the time in which we're meeting them, right? Last but not least, that's really connected to our strong belief that racial equity is a core component of this work. Next slide. So racial disproportionality in child welfare, I'm sure among this group, you guys are pretty well versed, I imagine, in this topic already, but we know that it's not just a statistical reality, right? It's a result of historical and systemic inequities. And it's a statistical reality that has kind of stubbornly held steadfast over the last several years, decades of our work, right? We've seen some improvements, but generally has maintained the status quo. So it turns out Kin First practices are a very meaningful way to move the needle in the right direction and authentically addressing disproportionality and disparity. The data is pretty clear that children of color, particularly Black and Native American and Alaska Native youth, are not only interacted with more frequently, but they are also removed from their families at higher rates and are more often to be removed and separated entirely from their communities and put into the care and communities that are quite strange to them and unfamiliar to them. So kinship placements, which is one of the tenets of a Kin First culture, really help to correct this imbalance and disrupt disparity, because we know that when children are able to stay within their communities and with the people they love and in their families, they have greater outcomes. The disparate outcomes tend to decrease. Kin First practices also honor culture and identity. And we also recognize that cultural identity is in of itself a protective factor. So when we're doing our safety assessments, our strengths and needs assessments, cultural identity and cultural practices, familial cultural practice, ethnic cultural practices are components that we need to be tending to in our questions and getting to know that individual in that family system, and itself can be leveraged as a protective factor, right? So Kin First practices really center our engagement around this, right? We also honor tribal sovereignty and uphold the legal right of tribes to make decisions about their children. We hold a steadfast belief that tribes know what's best, right? They are sovereign nations, and their members, their families, are citizens of a sovereign nation, right? And they have the right to self-governance and determining what is best for themselves. So under Kin First practices, we not only uphold all of the provisions of the Indian Child Welfare Act, but we really want to be making sure that we're super connected and demonstrating with our actions that we honor and respect that sovereignty, right? So a true commitment to Kin First practice is inseparable from a commitment to racial equity and justice. It demands that we not only challenge our individual and systemic biases, but that we also intentionally focus our time, our attention, and our investment towards communities that have been historically excluded, historically marginalized, and oppressed, that by the very systems that are meant to serve them and support them. So as we move forward in our efforts statewide to cultivate Kin First practices, we have to be willing to dismantle barriers, restructure access to resources, to supports and opportunities, and confront, which can be very hard, the policies and practices in our systems that continue to produce disparate outcomes for children of color. Next slide. So what are some of the main tenets or goals, so to speak, of a Kin First culture outside of kinship placement? First and foremost, we want to be making sure that we are preventing removal at all costs. We want to be making sure that our serving systems are exhausting every last effort possible upfront, early, and often, so that families have a true chance to remain together, that they can have a chance to be preserved and avoid separation altogether, right? And with that comes the work of building out and enhancing networks of support, right? We have to be inclusive and kind of far-reaching when we're thinking about who we are engaging and who we are reaching out to help support this family and create a village around them to first and foremost make sure that they can be preserved as a family unit. And when that is no longer something that is an option because the safety threat rises to the need of separation, that we are first and foremost in exhausting efforts who in that kid's kinship family system can show up and be their placement, right? That we are stopping practice of defaulting to looking to licensed foster family homes or resource family approval homes, right? That we are really paying attention to and tending to who does this child know? Who do they love, right? And then we also know that relatives, we also know that relatives who are approved for placement and where kids go to kinship placements, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to go with all of their siblings, which is really important when we're talking about preserving connection and preserving familial ties and bonds, right? That amid something that could be so traumatic, right, for a child to go through a family separation, the fact that they have their siblings with them in the same house can be a tremendous thing for them to be able to hold on to and help them navigate the challenges in front of them. Okay, next slide. So when we're talking about connection and we're talking about preserving families, we are talking about all of these different domains of permanency, right? Permanency isn't just a destination, it's a foundation. It is fostering healing, security, stability, and it's from the very beginning, right? That our role and goal, as you just saw on the last slide, is to minimize trauma at every opportunity possible. Our systems, if we move too quickly or we are not slowing down and tending to thinking about all of the child's needs that could come across these four domains, that we run a very high risk of adding trauma to that child and to that family system, right? And oftentimes, I think we've seen some improvement over the last 5 or 10 years in practice and still have room to go. We are thinking, typically, when we're talking about permanency, we tend to think about legal permanency, first. And then we tend to think about physical permanency, right? So the first two things that I remember from my social work days that I was tending to was, where is this child going? Physical. And what's the concurrent plan? That's legal, right? If reunification does not end up working out, who's going to be that legal legal responsible person for this child, right? The more, I would say, equally as important, if not most important, is the emotional and relational and cultural forms of permanency that we need to be ensuring that we're tending to at all points in time when we are working with our families. Next slide. Okay, so one of the things that we know about kinship placements and kinship care is that children have an increased feeling of belonging, the sense of belonging when they are placed in a kinship home, a familial home. And I don't know about you all, but this idea of belonging has been challenging for me to sort of conceptualize. So I want to bring to you just a quick story to help you conceptualize what this is and why it matters. And I'm going to take you back to 2005, circa 2005. I was turning 16 years old, and it was my 16th birthday. And at the time, it was one of those kind of weird social things that mattered a lot. If on your birthday, you had a bouquet of balloons delivered to you at school, that was a big deal. And I remember very clearly, like it was yesterday, I spent the whole day at school and I was waiting for my turn, right? For this to arrive and for me to feel like somebody's paying attention and I matter to somebody, right? And it was in my very last period and I hadn't had anything show up all day, and I was started to feel pretty sad. Like, dang, I don't feel like I matter. I don't feel like I matter as much as these kids at school. And then all of a sudden, bam, just like that, a bouquet of balloons arrives, and it's for me, and it was from my brother. My brother was a year older than me, or is a year older than me. And I remember at the end of that period, I walked out with my bouquet of balloons, feeling so elated and loved and cared for. And he just gave me a big hug and he said, I want to make sure that you felt really special on your 16th birthday. And that to me in this moment still is this feeling of like, I matter, I belong, and I have this tremendous sense of love, right? And my brother throughout my life has continued to demonstrate that for me. And that in of itself has helped me face a lot of challenges and overcome them and make them feel more manageable, right? So that's what belonging does. And that's why it's so important for the children and the parents and the families that we're serving, that we're making sure that we're tending to this, right? Because it's not necessarily going to prevent life's car crashes or life's challenges, but it is absolutely going to help that child and that family navigate that difficulty a little bit better, a little bit easier, a little bit maybe breathing lighter, right? Because it's a net of safety. It's this sense that I matter, I'm valued, and I'm important in every space I enter, right? And last but not least, just a quick mention on belonging. It's not a one size fits all approach. We can't just assume that one thing is going to make somebody feel like they belong across the spectrum, right? So that's, again, part of our responsibility as we're working with our families to really be getting to know them and what helps them feel like they belong, and that we can't get in this like checkbox mentality of, oh, well, I placed this kid with a relative, so they must have the sense of belonging. Not necessarily, right? So next slide, I'm going to continue talking to you about a few more benefits of kinship care. And I want to call your attention to the very last, the most right side of the screen. Sorry, the very last thing. It says that children have an increased sense of stability. We know that when children are placed with relatives in kinship care placements, they tend to stay there. They have less placement moves, if they move at all. And I'm not sure about you, but one thing that comes to mind for me when I think about that is the ripple effect outward of stability that takes place when that child is living in one place and receiving whatever they're receiving in that environment, right? It ripples out, as you can see on the screen. They have better education outcomes, social outcomes, and across all domains of life. So when we're talking about well, why does this matter? Why is this so important? This is a really good infographic to refer back to help guide you and have conversations with your teams if that's an area where you feel like you guys need to start. So with that, I could sit here all day and talk to you about kinship care and why it matters, not just to me, but also to the children and families that we serve. But I also understand and have that direct practice experience that it's hard. We have a lot of barriers in place, and that deserves a piece in this conversation. It's a critical component. And we're going to come back to this in a moment, but I want to re-engage you in the Mentimeter poll. So Jessica, if you could go ahead and get that up, that would be fantastic. I have one more question for you. It's the same Mentimeter. Hopefully you still have it open, but if not, there's the QR code. I think we're seeing your desktop.
No, no.
And Geraldine just dropped in the link into chat. Thank you so much. The question is, from your experience, what's getting in the way of kinship placements and kinship connections? These are great. Keep them coming. Wonderful. I see a couple people putting some responses in chat too. Thank you so much. This is really important for us to acknowledge what's getting in the way, right? One of the things that we talk about in our KinFirst Academy classes is in order to accomplish true transformation and systems change, we have to first have an understanding of the conditions that exist that are holding the problem in place. And that's why we have a conversation about what's getting in the way, and also just to validate, like, this is hard. We're up against a lot, right? I generally believe that folks have well-intended and meaning to practice in a KinFirst way, but there's things that stop us. So please keep the responses filtering in. Like I said, we're going to come back to this in a little bit, and so I would love to continue to hear your reflections about what's getting in the way. But for now, I'm going to pause and I'm going to welcome in our colleague T and have you introduce yourself and take us from here for a little bit.
Thank you so much, Lizzie and Mandy and Jessica, for your contributions this morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is T. Frazell. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm a program specialist with the Resource Center for Family Focused Practice and a colleague of Lizzie's and Mandy's with the Center for Excellence in Family Finding Engagement and Support. Before we get into defining complex care, I'll just tell you a brief little bit about who I am and where I come from. Like I said, my name is T. Frazell, and I've worked in a couple of Bay Area counties as a social worker and supervisor. I've been in child welfare since 2006. It's hard to believe that next year will be 20 years of being a supporter and involvement in child welfare professionally. I have had the opportunity and the pleasure for the last 8 years of training, coaching, developing curricula, and delivering trainings all up and down the state, consulting with counties throughout California on a number of things, including racial equity and inclusion, and systems change and systems transformation. So I've done a lot of work around things like mental models and cognitive bias, the kinds of things that keep our systems kind of locked in place. And so I'm really excited to be here in this context to help us think through some of the real challenges and opportunities that exist when we think about really adopting, promoting, building and sustaining KinFirst cultures throughout the state. So we've had a lot of time today to be able to talk about, kids doing better when they are with people they know, when they feel a sense of belonging. And what we're going to be talking about throughout the course of the day, I just want to reiterate and emphasize, we often think about kinship care in terms of placements and beds. And we're going to be talking today about the importance of belonging and mattering. For a long time in my professional career, our court reports have included sections on lifelong connections for youth. And in so many cases throughout my professional career, I've seen that section just sort of be a check mark, a compliance metric. Yes, we're looking, or yes, we identify one person, but we're really looking at thinking about how can we center belonging and mattering in our decisions in systems of care around children, particularly our children with the highest levels of need. So as I talk with you today, I'm going to be talking primarily about data and definitions, but we're always going to keep coming back to what is at the heart of why we're looking at this data and why we are thinking about analytics and metrics when we're thinking about the ways that we are building our capacity to increase the needs of to increase the delivery of services to youth with complex care needs. So I want to begin by just defining complex care. When we say complex care, we're talking about not the youth themselves. We're talking about their circumstances and their needs. So when we talk about complex care, we're talking about those situations where youth have a number of needs in a lot of areas of life that have been unmet, often for long periods of time. And because of that delayed or deferred unmet need, often these youth need high intensity individualized treatment options. Moving forward, we're going to again be talking about this data as a way to think through the eyes, the experience, the senses of a child. And so before I take us too much further, I want to just share, I want you to think about a day in the life, your life. You got up this morning. Maybe you had your coffee, or my favorite drink, your tea. Maybe you took care of your children or your animals. And then in the middle of your day, authorities show up. They take you away. They tell you you can't call anybody. They tell you you can't go home and pack a bag. You're going to go someplace different. Maybe it's in another city. You don't get to go there on your own. Now imagine that instead of being an adult with professional coping skills and ways to think creatively and meet those challenges, imagine you're 7 or 3. And all of a sudden your entire world is upended. These are the stories that we know happen every day in our field. We know these happen every day, and we just want to bring ourselves back to the experiences of those that we are serving and helping. So as we talk about data, we're going to be thinking about the impact. What is the impact to the children and families that we're serving? Moving forward into the data, I want to just share with you briefly that a lot of where my information, knowledge, and experience comes from in sharing this data with you is through my very privileged seat at the table for the Center for Excellence Kin First Accelerator Program. There are 8 counties who have opted in to be supported by these entities, the Center for Excellence through CDSS and UC Davis, as well as Think of Us and Casey Family Programs. Moving forward, we can see the 8 counties that are participating in the accelerator program. Of these 8 counties, we have had launch events in 6, including just yesterday, our 6th launch in Kern County. And I'm really grateful to our Kern County representatives who are here in the room with us today, and congrats on a really successful day yesterday. So through these 6 launches, I've had an opportunity to be a front row observer to some of the data that we're going to be looking at in just a moment. Move us forward, please, James, to our last slide around the accelerator program. Very much like what Lizzie shared earlier, the overlap between the values and vision between Kin First Culture and the accelerator program are just right together. The one that I would just lift up here in our space today is that these 8 counties that are participating in the accelerator program are going to be identifying one thing to move forward, and it's going to look different for every single county because the strengths and challenges in each county are unique and distinct. So we're going to learn so much from this learning lab, and we're going to be excited, I'm sure, to bring our findings back to you in the future. But for now, we'll move forward into taking a look at some of the data that helps us to understand where we're at. And we're going to be using data not as a place to sort of like measure us up, are we in compliance, but really as a place to think about where we're starting from so that we can know where we want to go. So earlier, when we were thinking about those goals of a Kin First culture, one of those goals was around first placements with relatives. So I want to just share very briefly that when we are looking at some of these metrics, we're using these metrics as proxies to help us understand where we're at when we think about how we measure up with our indicators of what would show us what a Kin First culture is. So one of those metrics, one of those indicators is how are we doing when we are placing children in their very first placement? What is the proportion of those placements that are being chosen with relatives? And here in this context, when we say relatives, I want to be really clear, we're also talking about non-related extended family members. Earlier today, we talked about what our definitions of kin are, and it's a big funnel, right? So when we think about placements with relatives in California from the period January 1 through the end of December 2023, about 34% of our first placements across the state were with relatives. What do you think about that? Sit with that for a second. I'm going to come back to you in a little bit. I'm going to ask you a little bit more pointed questions about how this is landing for you. But in the short term, just start thinking about how is this landing? What are you thinking about? Now, when we think about predominant placements with relatives, we're thinking about for all children in care who were in care during the year 2023, where did they spend the most of their time? Predominant placement, where did they spend the most time during that calendar year for the time that they were in care? So here we can see that even if children weren't placed with relatives first, 45, almost 46% of children in California spent the majority of their time with someone they knew. So we're getting better. Note, we're not quite at 50% yet in 2023. Moving forward, let's take a look at the next proxy or the next indicator. We looked at one of those goals of a Kin First culture is sibling connectedness, sibling placement. So we're taking a look now at how are we doing? And I believe, Lizzie, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the same time frame. Is that right? Great, same time frame, 2023, terrific. So within that same time frame, we had when children were placed with relatives, 72% of the time they were placed with siblings. Did I get that right? Lizzie, come on in. Did I mess up that stat?
No, you're good.
Great. So what we see is that relatives are far more likely to take siblings together than non-relatives are. And we see this across the state throughout the data that we look at in county over county. Moving forward, taking a look at our next indicator, we talked earlier about placement stability and the benefits of placement stability. what we find is that the majority of the children with placement instability are in non-relative placements. So you can see here, this pie chart breaks it down. We've got when we have kids moving around within that 12-month time frame, in only 5% of the cases were they placed with relatives, whereas 17% of cases were with non-relative placements. Moving forward. So let's dig in more specifically to those youth with complex care needs. How are we doing with those youth? First, let's take a moment to move forward to our next slide and see this definition here. We want to make some distinctions. So I'm going to spend a moment here just sort of digging into what we're talking about. We want to start with identifying the distinction between complex care and placement instability. In a lot of the data that we've been looking at, particularly through the Center for Excellence, we've been using 5 or more placements over a 2-year period as a stand-in or a proxy for complex care needs. This is not a clinical definition. It's not a comprehensive definition, but it's a stand-in, a data point that reflects placement instability that we are using as a signal, right? A red flag going up to indicate there's something going on here. One of the questions that came up earlier in the chat is, if we've got 34% of kids in care identifying as LGBTQ+, we should be talking about whether or not the family's acceptance of the individual's sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression is a factor in whether or not they are placed with kin or not. I think that's the way I understood the question. And it's really complicated to be able to dig into that sort of qualitative experience to represent thank you, Vida, for indicating that I interpreted your question correctly. I appreciate that. We are really doing what we can to try to use analytics and metrics that we can grab to help us raise those red flags, to point us to places of getting curious. And so for now, these 5 or more placements in a 2-year period are maybe not the best, but one indicator that helps us to get curious about whether these youth have complex care needs, these broad sets of needs in multiple domains requiring individualized supports. So again, 5 or more placements does not mean complex care, but it helps us to analyze high-level statewide trends, helps us to illustrate where additional support is needed, and helps us to recognize the correlation between those moves and the needs that might be indicated by that placement instability. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I hope that was clear. I'm going to move us forward into where does that set us up to talk about. When we look at this specific population of children, and we're taking a look at recently extracted data in April of 2025, so we're looking at really recent data, what we see is that children with 4 or more placement changes in that 24-month period spend far less time in relative placements. Not far more time, but significantly more time in non-relative placements and far more time in congregate care or short-term residential treatment placement facilities. Relatives in particular, we are looking at 49% of youth with 4 or less placements being with relatives, and only 17% of youth with 5 or more placements with relatives. Moving forward, we also see that these children have many more placement changes at a rate of about 3.75 to 1. who are, sorry, Lizzie, can you come forward really quickly and help me share this slide? I also need to grab my charger. My apologies.
Yes, of course. This slide is just a visual representation that children who have 5 or more placements end up having about 4 times as many placement changes, placement moves than those youth who have 4 or less placement changes. So again, when we know when children are having 5 or plus more placements, they just move a lot more. They have a lot more placement instability. And I can move us into the next slide while T is plugging in.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. I appreciate that. I appreciate the assist, and note to self for future webinars, get plugged in before you get started. Apologies to all of you. So this is another piece, right? When we have children who have these placement instabilities, we've already seen this in that first pie chart that I showed you. Children with those 5 or more placement changes in that 24-month period are far more likely to spend that time in congregate care or short-term residential treatment placement facilities. Please move us forward, James. Appreciate your help. So here's where we're going to have you reflect on how's this data landing for you. So I'm going to invite you in the chat. We're going to pull up questions one by one. Can you move us into our first question? When you think about this data that you've seen so far, what, if anything, do you like? I'm going to invite you to type into the chat. What do you like? What do you like about this data? All right, so taking a look at some of the responses, we've got one comment that placement disruption is great for measuring placement stability. Can we also look at runaway status, length of stay at STRS-TP, or use of harm reduction arrangements? These are great questions. Another comment, what you like is that this shows the impact that kin placement has on overall outcomes. And I also love this. What you like is it's a starting point. Let's move us forward to the next question. Yeah, I love that last comment. It's a starting point. All right, so how's this landing for you? When you think about this data, what do you wish? What do you wish? Yeah, so I'm seeing one of the comments here is that, this is data that's familiar, kind of like Lizzie said, Kin First is not new. We've known for a really long time in child welfare that, as Lisa's pointing out in the chat, that family lends additional stability that non-kin placement don't. Yeah, been a trainer of safety organized practice for a long, long time, and networks of support and safety circles for families and getting non-professionals involved into those networks are critical. All right, I'm going to move us forward, James, into the next question. What do you wonder? We have a wish coming in. We wish the number was higher for relative placement, and wish that placement instability was lower regardless of whether these were kin or foster placements. And I love this. I wish it was an easy concept for other professionals to understand. Yeah, to that point, we find so often, especially through these launch events, that it is so critical to get all the players in the room together, to have seats together at the table to talk about our joint responses, to talk about our shared role in getting kin first and always to the table. All right, I'm not seeing any wonders coming through, so I'll move us forward to our final question. When you think about this data, what is the impact? What impacts to children, youth, and kin caregivers is this data pointing us to? What are the stories underneath this data? How is How are these numbers not just numbers? Here's a wonder coming through. I wonder if this would reduce the number of resource families. Oh my goodness, you and I could have a conversation for 2 days about this topic. Um, there's a lot that's embedded in the way that we practice, the way that we have been choosing placements for children. I wonder, to that wonder, if this would help us rethink entirely our approach to placing children. What is the impact? What happened in relative placements? Why did it not work? What support for kin is present? Yeah, love that. I love that. So as we sit with these questions, as we sit with this data, I'm going to invite us. Yeah, there's always wraparound. We're going to actually move into supports and strategies and kind of really speak to some of those actual barriers that we face. So Lizzie, I'm really excited to turn this back over to you.
Great, thank you, T. I want to respond to one of the things that came into chat really quickly about that curiosity and wonder by May Lee. What happened in relative placements? Why did it not work? What supports for kin? And one thing that's taking me back to was one of our launch events, and I believe it was a parent partner in the room who raised his hand and kind of courageously said, maybe we need to be considering that placement moves are not always an indicator of additional trauma, or bad, so to speak, that maybe we need to consider it's actually a sign of something positive, that we're moving children to relatives, that we're moving or keeping children with relatives. And he also kind of doubled down and said, is it a bad thing if a child moves from one relative to another relative to another relative to another relative? Is that a bad thing? And I really love that question because it allowed me to have a different perspective on that data point and that conversation. And I wanted to bring that in for you all too. And just, if nothing else, raise awareness. And second of all, as you're thinking through data and those points, that it's not always a bad thing necessarily, right? With our placement move numbers, and to keep that in mind. So with that, we're very sad. We had 2 youth ambassadors on the line to support this event, but both had things come up in life. Life lifed this morning and this week. And unfortunately, their faces and their voices are not able to be here in this virtual space with us, but we have an opportunity to bring in their voices on their behalf with their permission. Lauren Mendez and Fatima are both youth ambassadors with the Youth Engagement Project. We have Ion Jones and Margot in the room, who are both supporters and employees over at the Youth Engagement Project and close partners with us at the Center for Excellence. Thank you both for being here, and we appreciate your partnership. So in the interest of bringing in their voices, James, I'm going to have you roll us into the next slide. We had some questions that we were going to pose to Lauren and Fatima and really get their perspective on these questions. And they're not here, but we do have some things to be bringing in on their behalf. And Fatima actually wrote out answers to a few of these questions that I'm going to go ahead and read on her behalf so that you all can hear directly from her, because she's making some very important points. So to the first question about sharing a little bit about herself and her journey as a youth who navigated the child welfare system, she says, my name is Fatima and I live in Sacramento. I'm currently a junior at Sacramento State University. I enjoy going to the gym, coloring, reading, and skating. She works with the Youth Engagement Project, where she says, I use my experience in foster care to advocate for change. I've shared my story in various meetings, including peer partner hubs, education task force meetings, and as a part of the planning committee for the Independent Living Program convening organized by the California Department of Social Services. My journey through foster care was very challenging, similar to many other foster youth. I felt unsupported by both my social worker and my foster parents, which made it hard for me to navigate school, apply for FAFSA, and earn my high school diploma. I often felt alone, as it seemed that no one cared about my well-being. I had to face many struggles on my own. One important detail I don't mention a lot is that I'm an immigrant. I came to the United States and was put into foster care just a month after my arrival. This made my situation even more difficult, and I truly needed more support than I received. I believe it was unfair that my social worker and foster parents did not consider this aspect of my life. Despite these challenges, I remained determined to achieve my goals. I earned my high school diploma, my driver's license, and 2 associate degrees with honors. Now I am pursuing my bachelor's degree at Sacramento State University. Not every foster youth has the resilience to overcome life's challenges without support. That's why I'm passionate about advocating for foster youth. I want to ensure that others don't have to face the same struggles I did, both during their time in foster care and after aging out of the system. That's the first time I've read that, and I had chills and tears in my eyes, in particular around the component of her mentioning her immigration status. Very heartfelt share for her that really lifts up what T and I have been speaking about, right? And that part of our work is making sure that we're tending to the sense of belonging and that we're really tending to something that for her was very critical, her status of an immigrant, right? Being away from a country where she felt maybe more familiar and connected, right? First and foremost, wow, that's already a tremendous experience, right? And then on top of it, being removed and placed again into another system with a tremendous amount of uncertainty and lack of support in her experience. So again, tying it back to one of our goals that I started us off by saying, we're set on fire about improving the lives of children and families throughout the state of California. And I think this group is also set on fire with us. And we feel that the most sure way to do that is to knock down barriers, to tend to those barriers, and to really be making sure that we are advocating and prioritizing families at all times, right? If not for placement, then what else, right? What other ways can we make sure that we are casting a net far and wide so that families, so that children, while they navigate these really scary and uncertain times, have the opportunity to have people in their lives that can help them navigate these tremendous challenges that would be hard for even an adult, right? That we know are hard for adults, let alone children whose brains are not fully developed. And when it comes to the second question around what is one important tip that social workers or direct practice staff should keep in mind when considering kinship placements, especially when they're not living with relatives. Fatima wrote a response that I'm going to read. She said, the importance of keeping youth connected to their family and culture can vary greatly. Personally, I wanted to stay connected to my religion, but not necessarily to my culture, as I did not agree with everything in my cultural practices. This perspective can be quite different depending on the individual, and I have heard from other youth who feel strongly attached to their culture. Foster parents need to understand the cultural backgrounds of the youth in their care and be sensitive to their needs. Some youth may take their culture or religion very seriously. For example, when I was in a foster home, I told my foster parents that I couldn't eat pork or pepperoni because of my religious beliefs. Unfortunately, they didn't take this seriously because they didn't understand the importance of the issue to me. To make them understand, I eventually had to say that I was allergic to pork. It's not enough for foster parents to just learn about different cultures and traditions. They must also be careful and understanding. If they make a mistake, it's important for them to apologize and ensure they avoid repeating that mistake, especially if the youth has mentioned it more than once. This level of respect and understanding is important to keeping them connected to their family and their cultural identity. So profound. And I wish that she could be here so you all could get to know her a little bit more. She's a wonderful human being. And I want to connect this back to something I've seen filtering in through the chat in a different domain around the needs of youth who identify as LGBTQ+. And I think there's a direct connection here to what Fatima is saying, is that not everybody is going to have this automatic understanding of all of the needs of a child, right? That's impossible. Even if they are family, even if they've known that child their whole lives or for a period of time, it's impossible, right? So part of our work is coming alongside those people and making sure that we are support and helping them raise awareness, bring an understanding, ensure that they're apologetic for their mistakes and that there's a repair that's taking place, right? And everybody might need a different level of education and coaching through that. But it's really important, right? Because I think the sentiment here is let's make sure that whoever that child is being taken care of and spending their time with are tending to their needs at all times, right? And learning when they're not and making adjustments so that they can improve and support that child better moving forward. So, T, is there anything else that you would like to lift up from our conversations with Fatima or Lauren about either of those questions?
I was taking a look back at, I'll just mention that Lizzie and I had an opportunity to meet with Selena, Fatima, Lauren, and Margot and Ion a few times in preparation for this. So we had a number of conversations with them, and I was looking back at some of our notes, and I know Lauren told a really impactful story about youth experiencing homelessness. And I am struggling to remember. I'm wondering if you had, if that was present in your mind.
Unfortunately, it's not. I'm sorry.
Wish I had
I do
taken better
know.
notes.
I know. I do know that Lauren does work directly with youth experiencing homelessness or houselessness. And I do recall her talking about the importance of making sure that they're afforded opportunities to be connected with and living with people that that are important to them, right? And I'm not sure of all the reasons why these youth in particular are accessing services at that program. But the fact that they are unhoused is a big deal, right? That's a tremendous amount of instability. And a lot of her work, it sounded like, was trying to make sure that they have an opportunity to talk through and think through ways that they can maintain connections with those people, despite maybe not being able to live with some of them. Perfect. Awesome. Again, I wish that they could be here for you all. They're wonderful. We adore them very much. And on that note, oh my goodness, when we really jumped into talking about child and family teaming and child and family team meetings, they dropped it like it was hot in that conversation. And I can't, myself and T are certainly going to do our best to recall some of what was shared with us. T, do you want to kick us off with some things that you recall around what we talked about with child and family teaming and the process of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, before we get into the question on the slide around what worked well in the most productive CFT you ever attended, I think one of the things that really was very, has really stuck with me from that conversation is a really kind of simple example that from my lens as a former social worker and supervisor, I know this would not have occurred to me to even consider. But Lauren shared with us experiences of supporting youth in getting appropriate clothing for the CFT meeting. What Lauren shared was like these, youth that she was supporting were saying, everybody in this meeting is showing up in business casual, and I don't have that kind of clothing. And that was like one of those simple but profound, oh my gosh, if we really do that imaginative curiosity and really imagine ourselves in the role of that youth, what would our needs be? It was such a phenomenal example of, again, small, and we're talk about this as we move forward, small shifts to really make a big impact. So that was the one thing that I wanted to make sure that we shared from Lauren's perspective. Lizzie, what else are you thinking about?
Yeah, I remember Lauren, when we were talking about well, maybe we should transition into the next slide and we can kind of toggle back in our discussion about these questions in the next slide, because I think this next slide sort of drives us home. We were prepping and talking about how we were going to introduce this information into this webinar, because as we've talked about, one of the main vehicles to accomplish our goals, right? We want to build off of what's already in place. Kinverse is not one more thing to do. It's folding into the things we are already doing as a system. One of those things being child and family teaming and child and family team meetings, right? That is a vehicle to help us build out our networks of support and invite those folks to our tables to show up for that youth, right? We have this statewide data here that really kind of, again, is a starting point. It's an entry point into this conversation. This is not specific to any one county. This is just a glimpse of statewide in California, when child and family team meetings are being documented in the CMS CWS system. This is what the data is reflecting as far as who is showing up to those meetings. Right. So in our preparation with Lauren and Fatima, we started talking about this, and we started talking about some hypotheses that I have, that T has, about what this data is telling us, right? The first thing that stands out most to me is that the child welfare social worker there is 91% of the time. That's great. That child welfare social worker, you all need to be at your team meetings, right? And if you can't be there for some reason, is your supervisor there or is a colleague there that you've prepped and prepared them to be there and standing in on your behalf, right? And also, as we move along the spectrum of folks under these categories, we see some dramatic differences and changes, right? And there's a variety of reasons why some of these people are not showing up. It's not that we haven't invited them or included them, but also, is some of that possibly present, right? And we started talking about the child specifically. At the percent in which the child is showing up to these meetings across the state, 48%, half the amount of time that these meetings are happening and being documented, right? So I started talking about, like, okay, let's unpack this, right? And I was like, what would you say to a social worker or a practitioner who's saying, but the child doesn't want to come to the child and family team meeting? And Lauren was like, okay, let's talk about this. How was that youth prepped? Did the social worker take time to slow down and really fully explain the purpose of the meeting and leverage their voice and who they want at that meeting? Did they take time to ask the youth, what do you want to talk about in this meeting, right? And so she gave some really good concrete examples, again, as we're talking about some of these small shifts and strategies that we can start taking and doing on the other side of this webinar today in our practice, right? And I thought that was really beautiful, that she was like, let's take time. And I think she even in her explanation was like, did we hype the youth up? And I was like, I don't know, but like, that's a great way to frame that, right? Like, let's hype them up, because at the end of the day, this vehicle is intended to be something to support them and truly, truly authentically support them. TIC, you're off mute.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that that Lauren said was, taking a look at the data where the child is present 48% of the time. That's that fourth from the left bar graph there. That's less than half. And Lauren was like, can we even call it a child and family team meeting if the child isn't present? Right? So I think it's both hyping up the youth, but also hyping up what the meeting is and helping them understand that it is their right to be present, to be participatory in their case planning process, and to make sure that they are not only feeling enthusiastic about their level of participation, but also feeling confident, prepared, and grounded for what to expect, how they should show up, especially if it's their first CFT meeting.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And I think one of the other things that comes to mind for me too, and I'm seeing clearly start to pop up in some of the responses, excuse me, in the Mentimeter, is around this idea of mental models. So we talk about this in our Kin First Academy classes, in our resources, in our events. And mental models are essentially like deeply held beliefs and assumptions, right? We all have mental models. We all come into this work with certain mentalities and assumptions and judgments about people, right? And about things, right? That's just a very human thing for us. But one of the things is when they're left unchecked, right? When we don't examine them and we don't pick them up and turn them around every way possible and consider, there's a very high chance that that is affecting the outcomes, right? You all listed some many great barriers in our Mentimeter, which I'll go back to in a little bit. But I think some of that starts popping up in my head, in particular about some of these other individuals that you can see on the screen that are not attending routinely to these child and family team meetings. And that makes me wonder, what, if any, biases, judgments, or mental models do we have systemically and also individually that are preventing us from truly engaging, including, and creating an environment where they feel safe, comfortable, and excited to be a part of these conversations and these meetings, right? Specific to Native American families and Native American youth, there's a lot of cultural practices that tribes like to bring into their child and family team meetings, right? And so some of the counties here in this room with us, San Diego, I think I saw you. I know you all are doing some great practice around the structure and the environment of your child and family team meetings to make sure that the cultural components are embedded into these meetings, right? Because this is a meaningful space. So how can we treat it and tend to it in a way that feels more comfortable and like an environment that we would want to walk into if this was our family that we were meeting about? T, anything else?
Oh, goodness. Let's see. Yes, I have a couple of quick things to just add from our conversations from Lauren and Fatima. One of the things that, again, from the perspective of youth, going into it being prepared, going into it being supported, really encouraging. This was a takeaway from Lauren, who really encouraged as a strategy. James, can you go back to the question slide, please? In productive CFTs, Lauren shared really, giving the young people not only the permission, but the encouragement to invite a trusted peer, somebody who's really there in their corner. And this is not something that I have seen in practice very often because of confidentiality laws, and also often because of the disconnection that happens between youth and their peers when they are in care or congregate care for long periods of time. So really like working with those circles of support, those safety circles, to really engage the youth in who are your people, who is a person who you would want to be by your side in a meeting like this, right? And then if we need to incorporate professionals like youth ambassadors, youth partners, advocates, CASAs, then we do that. And let's also, to Wendy's point in the chat, make sure that we are not only incorporating, but really centering and uplifting those natural supports that will far outlive the system's involvement, we hope, with youth with complex care needs.
Cool. Thank you, T. I do have a response from Fatima that I do want to read because I think it's a great example from her lived experience around attending a child and family team meeting. And it was around what worked well in the most productive child and family team meeting you ever attended. So there might be some additional strategies for you to pick and pull from here and consider adopting into your practices and your policies as an agency. So this is what she says. The most productive child and family team meeting I have ever attended was after I turned 18. Before that age, it often felt like my voice didn't matter. In this meeting, I felt truly heard. The meeting was focused on me rather than just discussing me without my input. They asked about my future plans regarding employment, education, and housing. My opinions were considered and my decisions were respected. For example, when I expressed a desire to continue living in my transitional housing program instead of a dorm, they supported my choice. Feeling respected in this way was very important to me. I believe many youth may not understand how important a child and family team meeting can be, or they may not even realize it's happening because they are often not included. This can lead to the misconception that young people don't want to be present. It's important to know that excluding youth is a violation of their rights. I think social workers should make an effort to include the youth's voice in meetings. When young people feel that their opinions matter, they are more likely to want to be involved. They should also be allowed to choose a support person to accompany them to a meeting, whether it's a youth partner, a friend, or anybody who makes them feel comfortable. Having someone they can trust can make a big difference in their willingness to participate. Often, social workers, foster parents, and other adults talk about their wants and decisions without considering the youth's perspective. When the young people don't feel respected or heard, they're less likely to want to attend the meetings. Improving the way these meetings are conducted can help ensure that youth feel valued and willing to engage. She covered a lot of the same things that we brought forward. And I think, again, just another beautiful example straight from the words and thoughts of somebody with direct lived experience and who's also closely involved in supporting youth currently in practice, right? And I know that some of this isn't new when we're talking about barriers, but there's still a need for us to be talking about it and addressing some of these mindsets and mentalities and approaches to improve our outcomes so that our data, again, if we were really truly a kin first system, I think these numbers across the board would all be higher. They would all be well over 50%, if not closer to 90, 100% all of the time. Tia, I want to roll us forward into kind of closing out the content in this segment around youth with complex care needs.
Sounds great. Are you taking this one?
Go for it.
Fantastic. So as we think about bringing these things back together between the data that we've looked at, the strategies, and thinking about the places where we can really make a big impact. If we think about those youth with complex care needs, as we've defined it today in terms of looking at the data with those proxies of placement and stability, we're really only looking at about 7% of the overall population of youth in care. Let's move us forward one slide, and we'll see that we can really make big impact with small shifts. Thinking about in your settings, in your counties, think about those youth that you know about, that you can call to mind, who are the ones who are moving around, spending a majority of their time in congregate care, in short-term residential placement facilities, and think about where this might bring forward in your role from your perspective, where we can make some shifts. Where might we have levers that we can deploy around policy or practice? Where might we be able to engage more deeply in reflection questions about our system, about the ways in which our organization interacts and intersects with the other agencies we collaborate with across the system of care? How are we partnering? How are we collaborating? So we're finding in many of these counties that we have been launching, we're finding where is there some soft soil to dig quickly? Where is there some branches with ripe fruit that's hanging low that we can pluck and begin to move forward? We know from implementation science that if we begin a little bit in the direction that we're going with sustained effort, intentionality, and attention, we can get big impacts moving forward. That's my cue to James. So we really want you to be thinking about, as we are moving from theory and data and metrics into practice and action, these challenges can feel overwhelming. When we think about systems change, one person cannot do it alone, clearly. However, each of us has up to about 15% that we can influence or control. So we really want you to be thinking about, what is your 15%? What is your 15% solution in this systemic issue? What is one action you can do starting today to help a child feel connected, valued, and rooted in family?
I think this would be a great opportunity to actually pull up those mentee results about barriers. So Jessica, if you don't mind booting James and pulling up the mentee results, because I want y'all to have a visual in front of you as you think through your 1% or something that you can do within your sphere of influence, in particular attaching it to the barriers that your peers here in this webinar space have named and called attention to. And there is a variety of them, and they are broken down. They can be kind of broken down into some subgroups around system barriers, family barriers, but there's some pretty profound ones in here that you all can take a look at. And we would love to hear from you out loud in chat. We're winding down our presentation. We certainly have time. If anybody feels compelled to share something, one action that you can do starting today to help a child feel connected, valued, like they have a sense of belonging, where's a shift that is within your sphere of influence? Oh, yep, perfect.
And while folks are, typing responses into the chat about what you feel invited to bring forward, what you feel invited to do more of, less of, differently, or better, many of these barriers that you all have identified are exactly the kinds of things that we at the Center for Excellence are thinking about, working on, engaging in conversations around. And so we know that there's lots of work to be done on the level of the mental models that Lizzie has been talking about. We know that both individual and systemic bias play a role. We know that bureaucracy gets in the way. And also there are lots of resources to be aware of. So, through your FE's support plans, you can think about ways in which you can get more support around getting guidance around some of those funding sources to be able to make placements, first placements with kin, updates around regulations for emergency placements and things like that. Susan, I see your hand. Come on in.
Thank you. I wanted to just come off mute instead of typing, but I wanted to share like that big aha moment that took place in the room yesterday at our accelerator launch is when the mention came up to the ACL 2233 that we can order the court-ordered placements and we can also get foster care funding for it. I think that like unlocked a huge deal for us because of I saw a lot biases that bias is what is preventing social workers from placing. But I think beneath the bias is just that fear of the shared responsibility because of we as social workers, we lean on that license, that RFA license as a shared responsibility, as in, well, you license the home. So therefore, there's that shared responsibility. And if I place with family, like right after removal, I'm not going to have all of the shared responsibility. It would have been my decision. Like, how much did I vet the home? Like, how much did I know about the home? And I think that the court-ordered placement alleviates some of that fear, but I definitely would be remiss to not mention that it is somewhat that fear of that shared responsibility piece that prevents social workers from placing into homes immediately if they've not been licensed. And with that, I land my plane.
Thank you, Susan. I so appreciate you bringing that forward, and I'm going to drop a link. Oh no, that link might be broken. I'll try again to get you the link to the ACL 2223.
I'm looking in chat and kind of responding and reflecting as well. And I really, Susan, appreciate what you lifted up. And it takes me back to, we held a webinar. One of the things that we do through the Center for Excellence is hold webinars. It's not on a monthly basis necessarily, but we have several on our website. And we can share that link with you to go back and review some of those. We had some of our local serving judges in the state of California come onto our platform, first and foremost, to kind of announce and bring awareness about one of our resources around our bench and bar toolkit, it was written by the bench and bar, so attorneys and judges, for attorneys and judges, and it's all about incorporating KinFirst practices into the courtroom, because we know sometimes that's another system barrier, right? And in that webinar, Judge Chan said, you know, KinFirst practices are documented and written all over statutes and legislation. And it's our job to leverage those statutes and legislation, especially in the courtroom. And I loved that, right? And I can say that as a social worker, I didn't always have an idea or understanding about the different laws and things in place that I could have leveraged in my advocacy. And so, when we kind of really truly wind down, I'm going to share with you our resources, but we have several resources on our website that really help elevate people's understanding and knowledge around the laws that do stand up and uphold KinFirst practices. And I think that's an important piece. So maybe that's your one thing, is to become a little better informed, right? So thank you, Susan, for your example.
I also see the shout out here in the chat from Antonio about the Alameda County child welfare practicing Family First for placement. And Antonio goes on to talk about the programs like the one he works for, the Parent Engagement Program. Antonio, I'm super familiar with the Parent Engagement Program. It is a nonprofit that works alongside the county. Antonio, do I have permission to invite you into the chat or read the rest of your comment into the webinar space?
Yes, go ahead.
No, you come forward. I heard
Oh,
your voice. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about the Parent Engagement Program, please.
So yeah, so we help parents, navigate the child welfare, to reunify with their children, help them out with resources, and we visit them once a week. We make sure they're staying in touch with their child welfare worker, and yeah, and also emotional support at times. So that's what we do.
Antonio, I super appreciate you and the parent engagement program and in Alameda County, and the youth advocate program in Alameda County. Alameda County has been doing some incredible work partnering with parents and children for many, many years. And I have really been delighted to work with many of your colleagues over the years. So please say hello to anybody who knows me. Appreciate you being here.
Awesome. I love what you said too, Antonio, in your share in chat, that helps make a social worker's job a little easier. Yes. Any way that we can fold in and support the work, right? And that's the importance of a strong network of people, because there's a lot of responsibility and duties and demands, and we need a lot of people, right? It really truly does take a village of support. So thank you for coming alongside your child welfare staff.
Can I also say something? It offers us an opportunity to do this kind of work, and keeps us afloat, and out of things that we used to do that we're no longer involved with. So it's an opportunity for us too, I feel.
Yes, absolutely. T, come on in.
And I'm just gonna say, Antonio, I know Lizzie amplified what you wrote in the chat, that you make parent advocates make social workers' job a little easier. Friend, you are underselling it. You make the social workers' jobs a lot easier. You build a lot of bridges. You reduce a lot of fear, anxiety, trepidation. Parent advocates, youth advocates across the state are doing phenomenal work to really help build bridges where there's been a lot of mistrust. And I think your role is critical.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm just paying attention to sort of numbers and people starting to filter out. And before the majority of folks start to exit as we are winding down, I want to make sure that everybody, if you have not seen our Center for Excellence in Family Finding and Engagement website yet, here it is. It is a wheelhouse of a lot of really good stuff. And so, yes, thank you, James, for scrolling down at the top point, at the top part, you'll hear a little bit more about our why, which is a lot of what we covered today in this presentation. And then if you scroll down to like the middle part of the website, here is more where like the bulk of our resources are. We've got classes. We've got webinars. We have peer learning collaboratives. Somebody in chat mentioned that you want to talk more about strategies. Yes, yes, yes. Our monthly peer learning collaborative opportunity is your opportunity to do that. We have statewide representation, county child welfare, county probation. We've got tribal representatives in the room. We've got behavioral health. It is open to the entire system of care. And the whole point is with a focused topic that month to really unpack what counties are doing, what's working well, what's getting in the way, and how can we overcome some of those barriers based on what others are doing. So again, that's a great opportunity for you, and that can be found under the classes, webinars, and events tab. I'm going to have you pause, James, and scroll back up a little bit. The middle part of the page, my dear, right there, pause. We have micro learning. So if you only have like 15 minutes of time and you want to get some bite-sized information, that's a great place to go. We've got 3 different micro learnings. We have toolkits. Currently, we have 2 toolkits. One is underway, or in the works, so to speak. The first toolkit is our policy toolkit that really talks about, again, all of the laws that stand up kin first culture, particularly in the upfront practices part of our work with families. And then we have our bench and bar toolkit, which is a great resource if you need to collaborate with your court partners to elevate your kin first practices in the courtroom. We have free consultation and technical assistance available to anybody here, any of your colleagues or additional partners and collaborators in this work. Last but not least, we're all about elevating the voices of lived experience. And so we've got some family stories that are available and soon maybe more under development. There's 2, they are beautiful, they are wonderful, and they are great. They're short stories. Again, so if you don't have a ton of time, that's another way to engage with this information. And each story has an accompanying study guide that was helped to be created by the families in the stories to help further unpack the video, to further our understanding and to further what we can do to make some improvements that is in alignment with our kin first culture practices. And then if you scroll down a little bit more now, thanks, James, we have a blog, we have our recorded webinars, and we've got some additional like all county letters, information about the accelerator program. Long story short, some information about our model programs. We have a ton of information and resources. And Geraldine, thank you for dropping that website in chat. I hope that you have an opportunity to engage with this and engage with us outside of this webinar. We might be back to unpack some more, which will be exciting. But that basically concludes our presentation for today of information, and would love to know from you all if there's questions or additional reflections that you have. We've got some time and we can stay on with you. And I think there might even be a poll, actually, an evaluation, huh, Jessica?
Oh yeah, we got that end of the presentation evaluation for you all. Please, please, please take a moment. We're going to go ahead and drop that poll for you now. We greatly appreciate your feedback and we do use it when we think about future webinar topics. But so while we are wrapping up with questions, thoughts, comments, just take a moment to fill that poll out. But I do want to give folks an opportunity to come into the conversation. You're able to use the raise your hand feature and we can call on you, or you can post your comments or questions in the chat as well. And while we're thinking, I just want to wholeheartedly send a huge appreciation to all of our presenters for today. Mandy, Lizzie, and T, you all did a wonderful job representing the Center for Excellence in Family Finding Engagement and Support. I gained a lot of great nuggets from this conversation myself. And I just want to share that one of the things that's going to be sticking with me that I'm going to be taking from this presentation is something that T shared, an example that one of the youth gave. It really had an impact on me today. And we have this misconception that youth don't want to be present at their own team meeting. But given the example that T shared about the pressure for young people to show up at these meetings in a room where people are look different, dress different, speak different, act different, talk different than they do, can be a huge challenge and a huge barrier. And I so appreciate that youth calling out, the business casual attire that everyone else in the room is wearing. That is a completely different culture, may possibly be a completely different socioeconomic status. And those are not considerations that we take into account. It's really, simple engagement, relationship building rapport. Are you thirsty? Are you hungry? Have you eaten today? What would make you feel more comfortable to be in this space with us? Being in a room full of adults is scary. It's intimidating. And if you look around the room and nobody else looks like you or is dressed like you, that can be a really overwhelming experience. So I just wanted to call some attention to that. I will definitely be taking that as I leave this webinar today. But it makes me think about belonging. How are we helping the youth feel that sense of belonging in those spaces? And a lot of the comments, like, what are the barriers that are getting in the way? Several folks identified that personal biases are a factor. So I want to, have you all consider, how are you practicing allyship? And what are the ways in which you are exploring your own personal biases and drawing attention to them? So please, Patty, I do see your hand raised. Please go ahead and come on in. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy. I really love this topic, and I learned a lot from it. And I am very happy that we have a lot of county workers today. If I may please tell them to please make sure that they do a lot of research to find families, kinship first before placing with foster care, foster families. I've seen instances where they place with foster family tonight. The next day in the morning or 2 days later, the child was removed because a family member was found. A child was just getting acquainted with the family, and this child was removed. This has happened so many times. So I think it would be better for them to take their time, do their research, find that family member. When you know that we're exhausted, we couldn't find any family member, and I'm placing, this child will stay here, I think it's the best time to place. Instead of placing today, removing tomorrow, taking to another. And I have seen where the child was placed with a family member, a week later was removed from that family member because that family member couldn't do it. So please, placement staffs, if you're here, please do diligent, take your time, you know what I mean. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. I appreciate that so much. You're spot on. We so often make the expedient decision. There's a lot of time pressures. It's hard to find family, and you're absolutely right. When we think about it from the perspective of the child, the more times the child is moving, the more they have an opportunity to create a false narrative about themselves and about why they're moving. So the more that we can minimize that, the better. And we should really be looking at, making placement changes when they are in the direction of people that they know for sure. Susan, I see you.
Thank you. I hate to start conversation right at the end, but I think that what Patty just addressed is kind of like at the heart of a lot of the discordance, as in the child needs to go to a safe placement somewhere. I know that there's a lot of pushback against shelter care, but I do agree it does take time to not only find a family, but a family where the child can find acceptance, belonging. And we can't just keep the child at our desk in the office while we find that perfect placement. So we do need to find, a middle ground. And I think that I would appreciate more guidance on how to do that equitably, fairly, like trauma informed, because we don't want to place at an emergency foster home only to rip them back out. But we can't keep kids in shelters, and that's why it's so difficult.
I would love to jump in and take some of this for sure, because I think that's a great question and I appreciate you elevating that. So first and foremost, yes, right, we have some real system barriers that we're up against, and it's not always that we find the right perfect placement out of the gate, right? So what can we be doing in the meantime to help ensure that that child is connected and in a way that helps them feel a little bit better, right? There might be some obvious things that we can't work around. But one of your colleagues in chat put a great example, allowing the youth the ability to call someone, right? I know that there used to be practice, there might still be some of this practice where it was like the second you come into care, man, you are locked down. Like you are going into an institution, but you're not. You are, but you're not, right? You're not going into a facility, but we're taking your phone. We're not allowing you to call anybody, right? And that signals a huge sign of mistrust immediately out of the gate. We don't trust that you can call somebody that matters to you, right? And if we are going to let you call somebody, we're going to be hovering over you the whole time during that conversation because we're worried about what you're going to say, right? We have all these fear-based practices that drive some of these decisions. And I think that's a lot of what we need to be bringing into our reality during especially the time of removal. Like what can we do to help make sure that there's something that can be done or some things to do to tend to some of these other needs, the emotional needs of that child. They need to call somebody and be comforted by somebody they feel that can comfort them, right? Maybe it's allowing them to actually see somebody that they feel comforted by, right? If they're not safe enough for a placement move right now, can they be safe enough to see that kid for a little bit? And if it's in the middle of the night, can they maybe not see them right then, but can they see them the next day? Can they take them to coffee? Can they drive them to school? Right? Like, so those are some of the some strategies to be thinking about. And T, I'm wondering if there's anything else percolating for you in your conversations at launch events that are also great things to consider strategies wise around Susan's question of what else can we be tending to?
I would just say that the one practice strategy that I find incredibly helpful for amplifying the voice of the child in terms of who their people are is for those counties that use the safety organized practice engagement strategies. Man, that safety house. That safety house is one of the best things I've used in practice to help amplify for children, for our agency from the child's perspective, who the child knows is safe. And there are many aspects of that safety house that can really be very, very useful for that specific question. For those who are familiar, it's primarily like who can come in and who can visit and who should stay out. Those are the main questions from the safety house that can really provide clues from the child's perspective, who are my kin and who's dangerous to me.
I love that. That's such a great reference point. And the other thing I would just say to kind of add on to, if you're having a hard time kind of thinking through some of this, trying to put yourself in the position of, you know, if you were to be removed or separated from your family, what would you need as a human? What would you want as a human? And then if you need to take some of that into your conversation and empathize, and then also offer some ideas to brainstorm with that child to help them figure out what maybe they need. I'm looking at the time. We're almost at time. So I want to respect that. Jessica, I'm not sure if there's other things that you need to attend to before we close down shop.
Oh, thank you so much, Lizzie. I'm seeing that most of the folks who are left on the call have completed that poll. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate your participation there. Again, I just want to give a huge shout out to our UC Davis colleagues at the Center for Excellence in Family Finding Engagement and Support, as well as our CDSS partners that are also on this call. Y'all did a great job today, and it was wonderful being here and watching you present on this topic. And yeah, for everyone else left in the room, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you next month. Take care.